Shalom. This week's Torah portion continues the puzzling section we began last week. In last week's Parsha, Metzora, we were given the properties and the remedies for a skin disease called sarat, commonly translated as leprosy. But it was actually some curable fungus that afflicted both skin, fabric, leathers, as well as plastered buildings and stone structure. This portion, Metzora, deals with how a person is purified from sarat. And the purification ceremony included offerings carried out by a priest, in addition to the afflicted person washing, shaving, and cleaning his or her clothes. Sacrifices were offered depending on the afflicted person's financial abilities. We learned that when the Israelites eventually enter the Promised Land, sarat could potentially afflict their houses, and depending on the degree of severity, the houses must be scraped off and perhaps burned down, while those who enter the house must be purified. Oh yeah, there's a lot more, and trust me, I don't think you want me to go any further. And last week I asked, why would the Torah devote so much time to this? I mean, the Torah is not a medical manual, and whatever this ailment was, it doesn't exist today. And indeed, the sages of our tradition couldn't accept this as some outdated treatment for a disease the Israelites knew little about medically. For our scholars, every word of the Torah has to teach us life lessons. Not how to be healthy, if you will. Leave that to medicine and science. But rather, the Torah teaches us how to be holy. And so even passages as bizarre and as out of step with life today as Metzora last week and Metzora this week, they have to have something to teach us today. Now, last week I told you that the rabbis teach that sarat was not a medical condition like leprosy, but rather an ailment that befell the Israelites as punishment for lashon hara, gossip, derogatory speech. For more on that, watch last week's video. But today, I want you to marvel at how the rabbis work their wizardry of the text to teach us a magnificent lesson about life. The portion this week begins by stating that if one suspects that his or her house has been afflicted with this sarat, this leprosy, they are to go to tell the priest, the Kohen, Kenega nerali babait, and say, I see something like leprosy in my house. That's in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 35. Rashi, the great commentary on the Torah, is watchful of the language used. Notice the person declares, I see something like leprosy in my house. That prompts Rashi to say that even if the owner is very learned and is certain it is sarat, he is not authorized to make such a determination regarding his own house. If you don't know, don't assume it is. That's pretty good. But a Rabbi Mordechai Zundel Rubinstein, known as the Ish Yehudi, took Rashi's comment and brilliantly goes one step further. He says, if you can't make a diagnosis about what's happening in your own home, you should also refrain from making a diagnosis about what's happening in your neighbor's home. Folks, I think he's not giving you medical advice, but rather, as I said earlier, how to lead a holy life. Because remember, for the rabbis, this is not a skin disease. It's about the need to avoid gossip and speaking ill of others. And that starts by not assuming you know what goes on in the homes and lives of others. What do we do all the time? We think we know what is going on behind the closed doors of others. We speak ill of others, their behavior, their conduct. Never once do we consider what may be going on in their lives behind closed doors. We have already diagnosed the problem, if you will. what that person is involved in, how they're acting, why. The Ish Yehudi is saying, if we're not allowed to even diagnose what's going on in our own homes, how much more so should we refrain from judging what is going on in the homes of others? I cannot tell you the number of times I have made a snap judgment, a diagnosis about why a person who I thought was so well off but wasn't more generous, only to find out later that the family business was struggling and about to go under. Or a regular attender of services who just stopped coming. And I thought it was because they used the synagogue only to have their son or daughter become a bar or bat mitzvah. But when in reality they stopped coming because they were overwhelmed by a daughter battling addiction. And they were embarrassed about coming. We know our lives are complicated. And there's a lot that's happening in our own homes that others don't know what we're going through. But we have no problem diagnosing the situation of others with certainty. My friends, I think a great lesson from this week's Torah portion is that we need to do a lot less diagnosing and judging of our friends and what is going on in their homes, and a lot more of what the ancient priests did when Tzara'at was feared. They simply came to the homes of the afflicted and by their presence declared that the community cared and the community was there for them. As I said last week, I appreciate how the rabbis turned this bizarre skin disease into a lesson in how we speak to each other. And I love this week how the rabbis take the diagnosis and turn it into a very important reminder of how we should judge, or rather, not judge one another. Shalom.